Hi there. It's been a moment since I posted, and I thought I would post something about a question that is asked a lot, which is what should I write? And I can only tell you how I make a determination about what I write, and certainly wouldn't advise you what you should write, but kind of is. This is, especially, it's in fact entirely applicable, obviously, only to spec scripts, speculative screenplays. Most particularly those that are designed to get you your first break into the business, to get you noticed, but also applicable to everybody, I think, who writes spec screenplays. Spec screenplays used to be a thing. They're not so much anymore. Few people write them, particularly after they've made it into business and gotten an agent and become noticed. Most people try to go out and get sort of paid work. This is a completely different thing. This is about why you write and why you should write and what you should write. I think, again, I qualify that. And first of all, write what you want. That's the most important thing. Don't let anybody tell you what to write. I mean, there are different points of view on this. I've already established that I don't believe in getting other people's advice on what you should write, because I believe that if you believe in it, that's enough. And I personally believe, this is again just me, that a work of creativity should not be influenced by other people. It shouldn't be crowdsourced. It's funny, it reminds me of when Amazon first got into the content business. They were crowdsourcing it like they do, all the commentary on their items online. They were crowdsourcing the material that they would produce. They were having people vote on it or give them their opinions. It was a terrible idea. But be that as it may, write what you want. And that's another way of saying write what inspires you. Because inspiration is the most important thing that you have. It is something that is like true inspiration, like that, where you're so excited by an idea that you just have to write it no matter what. That is as rare as hen's teeth, and it's the most valuable thing that you as a writer have, I believe. And it's something that is very delicate too, which is why I kind of don't like to share things with other people, because, like a fire, like building a fire, when you first breathe it to life, you've really got to nurture it, and you've got to protect it, because the wind can blow it out like that. So you have to be very careful. So, however you proceed, be very careful. Protect your inspiration. Be careful with it. Be careful with it. Because I'm sure that as many people who have been inspired by things, by getting approval from people around them, just as many, if not more, have been discouraged by getting negative feedback from people. So write what inspires you. That's so important. But it's not quite as simple as that. I think you have to be inspired with discipline, is how I would say it. So you find out, there's many things that inspire you, but you perhaps should not write all of them. Make absolutely certain that what you're writing is something that inspires you, but also will inspire other people. You'll need to inspire people down the line. You'll need to inspire people to make the movie. You'll need people to be inspired to go see the movie. So in other words, write things fundamentally that are commercial. Now, of course, I've written dozens and dozens of things that weren't commercial, particularly at the beginning of my career, and sometimes you just have to get these demons off your shoulders or these monkeys off your back. That's fine. If you need to do it, do it. But if you're really intent on breaking into the industry and getting noticed, do think and be very honest with yourself about whether the nexus of what inspires you is also something that's going to inspire a good and a popular film. Third, you have to be very careful about the budget. Problem is that the movie business has changed significantly. I mean, it's changing very fast all the time, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. It's a double-edged sword. When a window closes, the door opens, etc., etc. But the thing is that the studios are not making, fundamentally, if you're setting out to write your first spec script, or even your third or fourth or fifth or sixth, almost axiomatically you do not own an IP. It is not based on an IP, probably, because most of us don't have the wherewithal to own IPs that have meaning, and that's, I mean, it could be from an IP, but is it, from a best-selling book? If it's not, if it's for something that's been self-published on Amazon, for instance, it probably doesn't mean anything as an IP. So because we have to write with that IPs, and because the studios almost exclusively make things built from IPs, whether they are sequels or remakes or what have you, they are generally made from IPs. So that means that spec writers today are put into an interesting position market-wise. That means to me that you have to write something that can be sold maybe to the studios, although they really don't buy content much anymore. They might pick it up to distribute it after it's made, that's absolutely the case, or when it's being made, that's a possibility. But they really are not in the business of making spec scripts anymore. So with that in mind, I believe you have to write something that is general enough that it covers all bases of the market. It needs to be good enough and catchy enough that maybe the studio will buy it. But also there's this larger sea of independent filmmakers out there who also want to make films. Some of it operate the foreign sales formula, etc., etc. There's a number of ways to get movies made outside the system. But if you can write a script that appeals to everybody, both the system and the satellites that orbit around the system, that's the... I look at screenwriting as like going to Vegas, and I don't go to Vegas because I'm not a gambler, but I do look at it like gambling, because it's a gamble every time you sit down in front of a blank page. And the house odds are against you. So we as writers, I believe, have to do everything possible to put the odds in our favor. We will never get the advantage in the odds. But, if you write something that is kind of, maybe not too commercial, or, it's a genre that doesn't cross boundaries in terms of studio versus non-studio, etc., then you're hurting your ability, your chances to, break in if that's what you're trying to do. Or sell the script if that's what you're trying to do. So when I sit down to write, I try and figure out I know what really inspires me, but I don't write everything that inspires me. I just write the things that I believe. I look at the markets, various markets that I know can sell in a number of different places, hopefully all across the board. And that's why you have to watch out and be careful about budget. As writers, we need to know the budget of the film we are writing. We need to know the budgets of every film that comes out. I pretty much can tell you the budget of almost any film that's come out in the last 20 years, and how much it made. Don't test me. But I have a pretty good idea, and after a while, you come to just instinctively understand budgets, and just by looking at a film, you can tell how much it is. And Box Office Mojo used to list budgets. Somebody somewhere got on them about listing the budgets, and they stopped. It was really valuable information. And I really enjoyed looking at Box Office Mojo and looking at what things cost and what they made, and opening weekend, and how fast they fell off, or not. Taken was a very interesting movie, by the way, because it's one of the few movies I ever saw that actually rose weekend after weekend. It was fascinating. But you need to know these things, because if you just write what interests you, but you're writing and say it turned out to be a $70 million film, and I don't advise you don't write sci-fi for this reason, because it is inherently expensive. Maybe down the line, but initially I wouldn't do it, or advise against it. But if you don't know what you're doing in terms of budget, and you write a script, and as good as it may be, but it's $70 million, who do you sell that to? And it doesn't have an IP. Very unlikely the studio's going to do it. They might take a flyer on a comedy or something like that. It doesn't cost a lot. And then, of course, they have these various in-house production units like Ghost House, etc., that will make horror films, and they'll take flyers on that, or Blumhouse. So you need to know how much things cost. And there is the sort of sweet spot for various things. With horror, obviously, if you can write something that's 5 million or under, that's really nice. A lot of people are going to be interested in that. I highly recommend that for people trying to break in. And then, the other thing I think that sells the best is action at this point. But the trick with action, of course, is that it costs money to shoot action. You can't just shoot it in a house like a horror film. I mean, there have been a few examples where there have been movies that have been made, strictly in one place and worked. But it's not easy to do. Action generally becomes quite complex to shoot. It takes time, etc., etc., etc. Unless you come up with a very clever concept, in which case I applaud you and I say go for it. But really, the thing about action is it's very tricky. There's action that may be under $12 million, which is tricky to do, but you can get it made. And the good news is that you don't have to cast it. And I'm going to get to that. That's point 4 after I finish this. You don't really have to cast it. I mean, you have to cast it a little bit, but you don't have to have Keanu to get it made. Then, unfortunately, the next step up is like $40 to $50 million movies, because it's very likely that the movie will end up getting made outside the studio system, because again, the studios very rarely pick up scripts of any kind. So that being the case, we have to not only need to know what the budget is, and you need to keep it in that $40 to $50 million range. But that $40 to $50 million range has to include point 4, which is the actors. Now, actors. It's incredibly important that your movie be castable, that every page of it appeal to an actor that can drive the budget of a film. Because that's the only thing that gets any films made, is the actor. Now, of course, they have the Marvel franchises, etc., and the IP, the underlying IP, is the raison d'etre for making the movie. But if any kind of spec script, the only thing that will drive it to getting made is the actor. It has to be castable. It has to appeal to an actor. Now, you could also write an ensemble piece. I would advise against it. You look back, there's some great ensemble movies like Usual Suspects, etc. That movie, as much as I like it, is very hard to sell today because none of those actors is successful enough to fund the entire film. So it's hard, then you're forced to piecemeal the budget together with various actors, and it becomes really, really, really tricky. The ideal thing is that you get one of these guys, there's not many of them in the world, to say yes, and because they can finance the pre-sales on a movie that is, say, between $40 and $50 million. The trick is part of that $40 to $50 million that you're writing to, that's not all, you don't get to use all that in your script, because a significant part of it could be between 10, who knows, $10 or more million is going to go to that actor, and then of course you're going to need a good director, a director that's approved by that actor, and that's not going to be cheap either, etc., etc. So before you know it, you've got at least $20 million below the line, which leaves you with, let's say, a $20 or $30 million film. So that's why you really need to understand budgets, and you need to write for actors. Now, I'll just throw this in there and out there, but when I write, if you read any of my screenplays, I really write in a point of view of one person. My scripts are always about just one person. They have more than one person, more than one person in it, but they're always about one, very specifically, very intently about one person. And I write in that person's point of view, and they are in every scene, almost every scene of the movie, usually, with some exceptions, obviously. And the thing about that I advocate is that it really appeals to actors. Actors love us to see their name on every page, and they love doing cool shit, and they like saying cool things to cool people, and they like being cool. And I mean, who doesn't? So I highly advocate that if you're starting out and you're picking what you write what you want to write what inspires you, but write also what inspires the audience. Know what budgetary box you are writing in, and make sure that it is castable, and people and actors are really going to like it. And that's what I have to say for today. I hope you find this helpful. I'll see you soon.